Hey folks, and welcome back to the Maindeck Podcast, previously the MetaManiacs Show. It's me, your host Dan. I'm back again, and we're here with Jordan.
How's it going, everyone?
And this is the podcast for trading card game fans of all styles. So if you're a fan of Magic the Gathering, or Yu-Gi-Oh, or My Hero Academia, Jordan, what kind of card games are you liking right now?
Personally, right now, I'm backseating in the Grand Archive train right now, and I'm up in the My Hero Academia card game a little less than I want to, but now it's starting to kick up now that card shops have people actually playing cards in them again.
Yes,
So
absolutely.
that's exciting.
Very
Other
exciting.
than that, just been playing some random online card games very sparingly. Just kind of getting my feelers out there.
Just kind of vibing on, on
keeping
the end
tabs
of
on Digimon, although I haven't played it for a while, but there are definitely cards out there that I want to collect, so I'm keeping an eye on where they're at and how to get them.
Absolutely. So this is the podcast for you. If you're a fan of any card games, if you're a fan of collecting card games, playing card games, every episode we're going to be bringing you some discussion on various card game topics. And we're also kind of a new thing we're doing. If you followed the old MetaManiacs show, this is going to be a little different, but we're going to be starting every episode now with just a kind of discussion about what we've been doing, what we've been interested in lately. So Jordan already gave a little preview of some of his talk here in our I guess banter section, I think is what it's called in many podcasts. Just going to steal that idea here because we like it. So yeah, as far as what I've been doing lately, been pretty focused on I guess Magic has been kind of the thing I've been playing the most, mostly just kind of keeping up on Arena. Kamigawa Neon Dynasty just came out, and that to me is like a super exciting set. I love, they have all this like anime inspired artwork on their like showcase cards and everything, which I just think looks super fantastic. And they even got some really cool stuff like there's a Planeswalker alternate art that's done by the artist who did Fist of the North Star, the original manga artist of that, which is like super, super cool. Just like in the last set they did it's really cool. And last set they did the vampire one, they did a version of Sorin, a vampire planeswalker, with art done by the Castlevania, most famous like Castlevania artist, which is just like, I just love that they're reaching out and doing that kind of stuff. So I just got back from the pre-release yesterday, and I think actually in our next episode we're going to be talking a little bit about pre-release experiences. So stay tuned for that. But so I'm not going to talk too much about what I did there. Otherwise, I've just been like playing a little bit of Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel. I don't think you played that at all, Jordan, did you?
It's on my list of things I want to play. There's a couple things that I've been like taking my attention elsewhere, but I've been wanting to give it a shot because I played Yu-Gi-Oh! Way like when it first came out. I even dabbled into some tournaments. I didn't play like hardcore or anything. I think I wasn't very able to compete at that time, but I played for fun and it was cool. But
was that like at release?
Yeah, that was like out of the gates. So like, unfortunately, that was when I was really not too big into like preserving my cards because I did it primarily just to play them. But I have a bunch of like cards that are like hyper banned, worth a bunch of money, but they're all like trashed.
Yeah.
Nothing too crazy, like nothing in like the thousands or anything, but like I had, a lot of the cards that people could consider really good. I think I had a Jinzo, which is actually kind of expensive nowadays, but I ended up trading it away at some point for some card that isn't as expensive as Jinzo. But at the time, I didn't know. And that was really before the internet had reliable sources to check prices for cards. So I was just like, it's the same rarity. I haven't seen that card before. It looks cool. Sure, it works in my deck. I'll trade that.
Nice. Yeah, back in the day when we would just like go to pojo.com were you a Pojo guy?
No, I was unaware of that.
Oh man, that was like the source. Actually, they're still active. I just saw someone link a Pojo link the other day. I was like, what year is it? This is wild. It was just this website that conglomerated like message boards for a whole bunch of different TCGs, and they had people who would post like card of the day and stuff for everything. So you would go there and get some like random people's opinions on a variety of card games. So I guess it was a lot like us. Maybe we're the modern Pojo, just without the message boards, but with a Discord server instead. So Maybe we're the modern Pojo, or we're trying to
Yeah.
be. I don't know if that's good or bad, but yeah, man, back then Yu-Gi-Oh was like a very different game, and all you did was like beat down monsters. The highest attack you could get without having to tribute summon them and attack your opponent and like
Yeah.
Raigeki their board and stuff.
Yeah, and then have OP magic and trap cards. I'll be
You
like,
know
I'm
what's funny?
attacking you, and be like, Mirror Force, you're dead. Congratulations.
You know what's really funny though, Jordan? Almost all of those are unbanned and at 3 copies in the game now.
Really?
Yeah. It's really wild.
I've also heard like trap cards and like magic cards, now called spell cards, I guess, like
Yeah,
function differently than they did back then,
they don't.
to my knowledge. Oh, they don't? I thought
No.
I heard, I don't know. I watched random videos and they made it seem like trap cards are not the same as they used to be and like they function differently, but they didn't
Well,
give any specific.
they're often not as like back then. You always kind of had a suite of like Mirror Force and Torrential Tribute and bottomless trap holes and stuff. You'd run all this stuff in like most decks. Now you don't really have a lot of slots for that because the game is just so proactive now. It's all about like why would I slot all these reactive things when I could be drawing cards that would let me combo off and like just like overlay summon, Xyz summon, synchro summon, link summon, like something that just then it lets me like pitch cards from my hand to interrupt my opponent and all sorts of stuff. And it would also kill the opponent. Whereas that's going to be a lot stronger than just like putting down a bottomless trap hole and then watching it get destroyed and then so that stuff is just not as useful anymore, which is also why you can like play Raigeki now, and it's like, yeah, you don't really need to run that card if you're like competitively making your deck. It's just not like back then. It was like if I suggested to take out Raigeki, you'd be like, you're an idiot. I'm not going to listen to you at all. Now, any competitive player will offer for like I don't know 99% of decks. They'd say you could probably lose Raigeki. It's not really that good. So. Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, Pot of Greed isn't legal, right? Like that.
Pot
Obviously,
of greed.
just draw 2 for free is like,
I mean,
there's a
technically it's 2-for-1 because you have to have Pot of Greed played out of your hand. Like you have to play it out of your hand to get 2 cards. It's kind of just
yeah.
one,
It's
but it's
still
a free plus one.
it's still stronger than all of the other pot variants that you can run now. There's ones that like banish cards from your deck to let you draw 2, or there's banish random cards from your extra deck to let you draw 2. So like they all have a cost of some kind associated with them.
Yeah.
Even though they're usually still pretty minor costs, and you can run 3 of those. So I don't know. Yu-Gi-Oh is wild though. I don't know. I've had a lot of fun with Master Duel. It's been pretty cool, and the good thing about it is it's like pretty easy to set up a competitive deck for free. I've put no money into it, and I have a fairly competitive virtual world archetype deck, which is like extremely fun to play for me. It's just very like combo-y and just like I really like synchro summoning and Xyz summoning. One of my favorite eras of the game was kind of the right shortly after Xyz came out, and everyone was playing decks where you're like you extra deck was just this toolbox of like crazy stuff you could summon, and it was all about just like, okay, given the board state right now, how do I like what do I try to Xyz summon to deal with this problem? Games went a few turns longer, I feel like, then than they do now. The game is just like really hyper like combo focused though, but that deck still lets me kind of like do some of that fun like synchro summoning, Xyz summoning, and you can like summon a dude who basically almost time walks your opponent, and you can do it on turn 1 sometimes. It's just like really silly stuff that it can do, and that's just kind of how the game works now. And everyone kind of has to run hand traps, like monsters that can discard from the hand to like prevent certain effects from happening. It's just how it is. I totally get if like people are like, yeah, that's too crazy for me. I like the old version because it is very different. But I would say it's still worth giving a shot because it's free, right? The only thing you have to lose is your time playing the game, and you'll still probably have fun for a little while. So, yeah, it's that. So I've been playing a little bit of that, and Magic Arena, a little bit of Magic pre-release, and Grand Archive, as you mentioned too. We've been doing some print and play, but mostly just waiting for the next print and play decks to come out.
Yeah, I saw some of the changes in them. I'm excited about them based on my previous experiences with the game. So I'm glad it's shaping up, and they're doing they're very receptive to how it's shaping up before the release.
One of the things that I really liked in the most recent round of changes for the game, because a number of people, if you guys don't know about Grand Archive, or go to our YouTube channel, we've got like a bunch of videos that we posted for it, and you can learn like a whole bunch of stuff about it there, and watch some gameplay footage. But one of the things I really like is that they've upped the starting hand for all of the spirits that you start the game with that determine your starting hand. So everyone starts up one card from before, which I think there was just a lot of like people, play testing and saying, it's like really close, but I just feel like I'm just a little constrained on what I can do and everything. So it looks like they tested it at another card, and they decided that starting with 7 cards was just a little more fluid or a little faster. Or
Does that mean the normal element is going to have 8 cards instead of 7 now?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure if we've seen an update to that Lost Spirit, but I really like that. I hope it does, because I think it's really cool to give up an element to just have an extra card, and is that worth it?
Yeah.
Depending on your deck. So
Especially if they add a cool like archetype, like an enchantment or a regalia, that's like if you only have normal cards in the field, you get X benefit. Because then you could have cool.
yeah,
That opens up a whole new deck archetype as well.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'm really excited to see how Grand Archive develops, and I recommend people go check it out and look into it. We should get starter decks in a couple of months, should be releasing, and then the full set a few months after that. And I just think it's a game where the developers are really interested in making sure that it's a balanced and kind of robust competitive experience. They're doing things that I really like. They have these plans for a really fully featured companion app like MTG Companion that people use to find events and play in events, and of course a tournament software that integrates with that and everything. And they have their software developers on themselves, so they have like good ideas for how they think the things should work.
Yeah. It's always
and
nice when the design people have the experience with the groundwork, because then when you're designing it, you have a good idea of like, okay, this will work well because it's easy to code this framework, so we can build off of that. And then it's just nice and easy to tune ideas when the engineer is also the designer, or the designer knows engineering, because then
yeah,
it makes it just a smoother process overall. Because a lot of times if you don't have that experience, like you'll have grand designs and then you bring it to the person who has to like physically make it, and they're like, this ain't happening the way you think it is.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think that bodes pretty well. So, of course, we'll have more stuff on that as it comes out, and I'm sure we'll probably do like a full podcast talking about things, or multiple, going down in the future. But
Maybe even a sick main deck tournament of some sort, casual or
yeah,
otherwise.
that's one thing that I have to apologize, because we've been talking about getting this podcast back for like months now, and it just hasn't quite materialized. And there's been a number of things you guys can see by like what's going on here. We put a little effort into kind of making the video quality kind of cool and stuff. So I was doing some of that in the background, but another thing I've been doing is just really working on our Discord server, and trying to sort of build up the community there, because I really want, the thing that I realized, I had sort of an epiphany last year was that I started doing this because I really like to talk about card games, and I like to have my voice heard about them. And then I was like, wait a second, everybody is like me who plays these card games. Like, I'm not alone here. I'm not like a special guy or whatever. I just put a mic in front of my face and started doing it. But what I want is I want everybody to be able to kind of experience that, and have a chance to be heard and everything. So we've been really working on just sort of developing the community in general, where we can have a place where people like us who just like card games, all sorts of card games, bouncing between them, playing different ones at different times, can just kind of have a space where they can talk and have their voice heard and everything. So it's sort of getting kind of tangential right now, but the point was, we're building this Discord server, and one thing I really hope we get to do at some point is get back to running leagues like we ran the Universes League a couple of years ago. That went really great. A lot of people really enjoyed playing in that. Jordan, you were the one running that, and
and we got a lot of good feedback too. So we can use
good
that
feedback
to tune the future, whether it's
Yeah.
Universes again or a different game. So
Well, I'd like to, we're trying to get these community leaders on our Discord now who are interested in doing stuff like that, and helping like run pairings and everything for leagues, or like you were doing, you had sort of special weekly bonuses that people would get to play to make people play kind of out of the box stuff and just experience all the fun that they could have playing the game, not just trying to be like straight competitive the whole time.
Yeah, that's an niche I definitely wanted to carve out because like if you want hyper competitive, like most OP circuits already scratch that itch. I wanted to like provide an environment where there's still some cool prizes on the line, but the prizes are almost better got by doing random out of the box stuff and really exploring the game.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And it's really just getting to have that joy of playing and sort of one thing that's, I guess, a problem with the current era of card games is that they get solved so quickly. Like metagames get kind of figured out and spread on the internet and everything that people don't get to have that fun exploration so much. So it really is nice to have. I think it's really nice to have league structures sometimes where you put certain restrictions in place, or rather than restrictions, bonuses for doing certain things that encourage people to get to play cards and decks and stuff that they wouldn't have normally, and actually get to feel that sort of exploration that we had back in the day, when we were only on Pojo and we just like checked out what Jimmy Nobody posted, and he said, "Hey, card of the week is this monster," and he's like, "Yeah, that's really bad." But then, like, I don't know, maybe who knows who's wrong there.
Yeah,
These
the
days,
internet is great for a lot of stuff, but it made certain things just end quickly.
yeah, it's true. So, yeah, I appreciate a lot of what it's brought, but it is nice to have an experience like that, like we've had in those leagues, that hopefully we can bring back to other card games too. So, speaking of universes, you've been digging My Hero Academia a little bit, right?
Oh yeah, of course. So being an extension of universes, I like it. I'm a little sad that standard is kind of taking a back seat, but I mean, I knew it was inevitable, at least for the first couple sets, because they got to get the My Hero standalone off the ground. And with the first set, it was good, and I like it. But being like with any card game, having just one set, I don't want to say the decks build themselves because there are some things you can tweak, but when you have such a limited card pool, it's like there are a lot of options that are like, well, this is obviously the only real option if you want to win because you have, 6 cards to choose from and you have to choose 5. And it's like, well, I have 5 to choose and there's only one I'm not going to choose. So I guess this is my deck. But
Yeah,
with the second set coming out, I'm really getting juiced because not only is the next set going to like double the card pool, but all the stuff that I've seen so far and they've spoiled are really interesting venues to take. They both amplify previous characters and the new characters along with the first set of cards. And we haven't even seen like majority of the set. We've just seen like a character and one of their support pieces or one of their attacks. And a lot of them are already like, oh, I can already see like multiple decks, or I'll see their support piece and be like, that's gonna be good in this other deck and like make it totally different. So I'm getting really juiced about it.
I think that's going to be huge for the game because just the one set, even though Universes has such a clever like resource system where every character can play one of 3 different resources in their deck, so like you technically have like at least 3 versions of each of their like what was it, 26 characters or something that were in set 1. There still tend to be a little bit of a cream rising to the top kind of thing where you pretty much just like, well, those 2 aren't great for what this character's abilities are. This is like really the resource where you probably want to focus. But having a new set of characters where they alter the resource symbols a little bit, usually is kind of how they do it. And then they have a new set of support for those resource symbols. So now you're talking like mixing, matching between various symbols. Which character do you pick? The old one, the new one, whatever. And I think they'll start to hit that critical mass where the game starts to become really, really interesting again. Like like that was the thing that drew us in years ago, and we were checking it out. We were like, wow, there's like no end to what you can build with these characters. It seems really
the deck
crazy.
building puzzle in that game was so intriguing, and it was like even though the game had been out for 10 years or 14 years, there was still so much debate about like what, like it felt like it was, I don't want to say unsolvable because there was obviously a few decks that were that were like, these ones are for sure like in the top 3, but the margin between top 3 and top like 15 or maybe even top 20 is so slim that like playing the top 3, sure, you have an advantage, but it's like you might win 1 to 5% more of your games. But depending, it changes so much depending on the player and what they were playing and how that matchup works and interacts and the different stuff in your deck. And like, since each card has, 4 to 5 different things to consider, there was very little time in any of the decks that I made, both in standard and for my hero, where it was like, this is the obvious best in slot for this thing. Because there was never that case. Because it was like, yes, it's best in slot for damage. But what about the block? What about the check? What about how much it costs to play? Like, when in your turn sequence are you going to want to play this? Is it feasible to play that at this? Like, there's so many different options. So it's like, this may be the best at this thing, but what if you need more low blocks? Then this is a terrible option. So like, there's so many nice facets that it made it stays a lot more fresh longer, and there's so much room to expand your deck building.
And I would argue even that you said that there were some decks that were just like clearly a bit stronger than the others. I would argue it wasn't even necessarily the decks, more so the characters that
for sure.
just had like you were going to see for a while there when we were, this is going to start to sound pretty dated because I think a lot of stuff has changed. But like for a while, it was like Lord Raptor, Gil. There's like some of these decks is like, you're going to see these. They're really strong. But it wasn't like, even then, there was still like, I think, choice between, which resource symbols you were focusing on, where you still were getting some advantage versus others. And if it were just like the character were toned down slightly, it would have just been another competitive option with various ways to build the decks. And I've noticed okay, so this is going to sound, this is going to be me not like knowing everything about what's going on, and I'm going to have you try and fill me in here, but I've noticed that the characters in My Hero Academia, are they all 6-handers?
A majority of them seem to be. I noticed that too. I'm not I feel like it's because they want a good baseline of just like basic characters, since it's the starting set. One of the things they've been really trying to drive home with like the My Hero set, and specifically set 1, is they're trying to wrangle in new players, and they know a lot of new players are going to play it. So they probably just want, for the first set anyway, are probably going more the way of like, let's have everyone be a little bit more average so there isn't such a weird difficulty discrepancy. Because very well, because you've played both 7-handers, 5-handers, like the difference in the way you play between a 5-hander and a 7-hander is huge. Like the way you even approach just like building your resources, when to attack, when to like just poke a little bit and build some more, like the dynamic changes based on that so much that they probably just didn't want to overwhelm players. That's also why this is a rule that I actually didn't realize until I was playing with someone here, and they mentioned it in the rule book because I was making me, I like to make decks that use a lot of whack stuff. Apparently with My Hero only format, you have to choose a single symbol, and every single card has to be a symbol. And that's another thing, like they did it because they wanted to reduce the barrier of entry to the game, because it is kind of complex. Even though they've done a lot, it's still a little heavy to get to, because like that way there is no chaining and no one has to worry about chaining, because you will guaranteed be able to play everything.
Yeah, and I want to fill in a little bit of info for people who just aren't familiar with some of the. I think we started a jargon a little bit there.
Yeah, I was going to say we should probably elaborate on some of the terms.
So the big part of the conversation was about hand size, right? And like we were talking about with Grand Archive earlier, Universes is a game where your character that you pick at the start of the game determines your hand size. But in Grand Archive, it's like it determines your starting hand. In Universes, it determines your hand size for the entire game, and sort of uniquely, it's
specifically not your hand size, your hand that you draw up to at the beginning, because there is no hand limit. You could have like 1 million cards and you can somehow manage that. But
I was trying to get to that. It's that in a lot of card games, it's like draw 1, draw 2 at the start of each turn. In Universes, it's you draw up to so until you filled your hand with that amount, whatever it is. So we talk a 6-hander versus a 5-hander versus 7-hander. It's not like about, oh, they started with 1 extra card or something. It's every single turn. If you were playing a 7-hander, if you spent your entire hand, you'd draw 7 cards at the start of that turn. And with a 5-hander, you're drawing 2 fewer cards every turn if you spent everything, which you don't always. But
Yeah, and 9 times out of 10, you don't want to spend everything unless you're guaranteed, unless you're like, this might win me the game. I'm going to try this, because if your opponent's turn rolls around, you also use your cards in hand to stop attacks. So like 9 times out of 10, you'll never use everything in your hand unless it's a last ditch effort.
Or you're like stopping the last thing your opponent's doing. You're like sure that they're not going to do anything else. Okay, I got to try and stop this or whatever. But then, the fun thing about that game is just getting me kind of excited just even talking about it, because then it's like, okay, but I could save this card instead of trying to block this attack. Like maybe it's like your really good attack. And you're like, oh, should I block this, or should I save it for my next turn so I can keep it and use it next turn to attack them with or something? It's like, yeah, the game is full of cool decisions. Again, highly recommend people check it out. If you're a fan of My Hero Academia, like Jordan said, they've made it more approachable, easier to get into, where you don't even have to know what chaining is. Don't even forget we even said anything about it. It's not a thing that matters. If you're just playing My Hero Academia, you pick a resource symbol, you build your deck around that, and you pick a character, pick one of their resource symbols, and build your deck around that.
And it's another great, like, to boast about the game more, I guess, is it feels like a soft reboot, because they're still continuing standard. They just need to build the foundation for My Hero. But it's a great entry point because it's a game that's been around for like 10, 15 years. And normally a barrier entry for a lot of people is, well, I don't want to have to learn, 10 sets worth of cards and have to buy 10 sets worth of cards right out the gate. With My Hero, you can play the My Hero only format, where the cards that are legal are literally just the My Hero, which is set 1 and soon to be set 2 within like the next month. So like you can get into universes with these sets at a low barrier of entry, have low amount of cards you need to buy and learn. And then once you learn the game, then you can open up to standard as you start building your card library as time goes on. And then you can get into both games fairly easily. It basically, long story short, it creates a great low barrier of entry to a game that otherwise would have had a huge barrier of entry.
Yeah.
Because knowing cards in that game is very important. It's one of those games where like you have to know how your deck works, but it's almost more important to know what your opponent might be able to do based on what they're playing.
Yeah, when you get to the really high level, it's like you really need to try and know what you need to stop and what you don't need to stop. And what kind of traps you're going to walk into, and knowing what your opponent even has on board, which is like, it's so silly. Like you can read everything, but the thing about universes is there's so much stuff on the board with effects that the more of that you've like internalized, the more you see something across for you and you're like, okay, I know the scenarios where that card's enhance ability gets me. Then the less like you have to like, okay, you played something, hang on, let me read every single card you have and try and like find things, because it's not really feasible to do in a competitive setting necessarily, because you're just going to take so much time like reading things all the time. So yeah, it's a game that really encourages you to know a lot of what's going on in it all the time, and a lot of the decks that are viable and are at least competitively played and everything, and you're rewarded for that competitively quite a bit. So I think some would say that means it's a fairly high skill game, because the people who are really invested and skilled and have seen those scenarios play out are going to generally perform better than the others.
Yeah.
Competitively. So,
and that also like rings true, because like if you ever see tournaments, like you see a lot of the same, like, and they play different decks almost every single time, which is also a good metric that like there is no empirical top 3 in this game. If the top like 10 players are consistently at the top and they bring a different deck almost every single tournament, like it shows that player skill is also like very highly done. Like one person that we've had the chance to talk with too, like really impresses me, is Shane.
Shane Duckworth. Shout out.
He's so good, and like he does stuff outside of the game that is really like, he's really good at like poker face reading the opponent. Like when he makes decisions too, he can almost sense that like when you're bluffing that you have another attack, and he'll just be like, yeah, I'll block it, with confidence. Like he knows what's going to happen. He's
like one of those people that's both intimidating and totally like chill to play with at the same time. He's like, you're like, I mean, I know you're going to beat me, but we're going to have fun at least. So that's cool. If I remember here, I'm going to try and link his YouTube channel down below because he posts a lot of like he really likes proving to people that you don't need to pay a lot of money to play the game competitively. So he posts these like budget builds that he'll like go win a tournament with like a budget build and be like, this cost me like $5 and I like XO'd the tournament and it wasn't even hard, like kind of stuff like, which is awesome. Again, it like he's got more skill than you probably. that statement goes for like 98% of people in the world, I think.
Yeah.
But that it means you have something to aspire to, right? Grab the deck and start learning and playing the game. So, okay, so we have to move on because we have bantered for about the amount I wanted to banter.
Sounds good.
And yeah, I hope you guys enjoy that. Like I said, we're going to try and do that every podcast and just kind of chat loosely about various card games. So do let us know down below in the comments what you think of that section and everything else. And we're just happy to be back here podcasting. So the topic of today is IPs in TCGs. And I asked Jordan and I asked myself, and I did answer that I would to myself, to think of one TCG that we thought had an IP. So IP, intellectual property. Let's make sure I'm not like jargoning again. We're talking about Star Wars, Star Trek, Dragon Ball Z, My Hero Academia, Digimon, Pokemon. Like what Pokemon? Yeah, Pokemon counts. I think Pokemon counts. It's like it's like almost its own thing at this point. Pokemon's like doesn't even feel like an IP in the same vein as Dragon Ball Z to me. It's just like Pokemon is Pokemon, right? Like, but
it is a monolith.
Yeah, but those are like IPs, whereas like games that TCGs that don't have an IP associated with them, I mean they do, but they started as a card game is what I mean. So we're talking about like a movie turned into a card game. So we're not talking about like Magic. We're not talking about Grand Archive because those are things where they invented the IP for the card game. And so I asked Jordan and myself to bring one great IP, one game where like it feels like the IP is executed perfectly in the card game. And when you're playing the card game, you feel, or at least, as close to perfect as you can get. And we feel that you feel like you're in the universe, or you feel like it's really representing the episodes or the show that you watched or whatever. And then one where, it's just like, it's not a bad game. Doesn't mean it has to be. Maybe it is a bad game. Maybe Jordan brought a bad game. It doesn't have to be a bad game, but it's one where it maybe abstracts things. I think I talked about this in a previous episode or a podcast. I don't even remember which one at this point. But you have this like difference between abstraction and simulation, and games kind of lean towards one end versus the other. A game that's, and the easy extreme example so people understand is like chess is a very abstracted game. It's not it's something about a king and some knights and some rooks and some bishops fighting each other. Yeah. It's about a war, but it's not simulated in any special way because like the queen typically doesn't just like charge across the battlefield and like murder everything, like whatever. And the king doesn't
more than just an L shape in real life.
Yeah. Horses can move more than an L shape is like a really good example of how like, okay, so this is abstracted quite a bit from like a simulated version of a war, which would be more like a lot of like modern board games where they like really try and like make it so things do what they're supposed to do.
Like a miniature game.
Yeah. For the bad example, it's like a game that it's like it maybe is just not simulating enough, or the simulation it tried is not applying like in the right way, and it just doesn't quite feel right, or just like So I don't know. I'm gonna let Jordan kick it off with his game that has a great IP.
All right, so I actually decided to bring two for both categories. One of a card game that I'm not a fan of really, and one of a card game that I do like for both categories. Okay. Because that way it'll be a little bit more fair. It won't seem like I'm picking on like one thing or another just because of like, oh, you only think it's a good IP, like that game or something like that.
Cool. So, I like that.
Yeah. So for the good IP, is going to be Panini Score Dragon Ball Z. I think it does a fantastic job of from the mechanics all the way down to like the restrictions you have on your game. Such as like, you can't play a Goku ally if you are Goku as your main character because there's only one Goku. Like you can't have multiple Goku. So I like that aspect. It really feels like you're in a, drag out fight the whole time. And a lot of times, most of the time, like it's down to the wire, and then there's some nice big play at the end, some big grand finale that ends the game. I mean, sometimes it ends with a whisper, but a lot of times it really has a lot of hype moments. Just like when you're watching the show, you're getting hype as stuff happens. There's twists and turns. Something happens. Someone changes power level. And the whole dynamic just shifted. Like the moment where you're trying to keep someone from, leveling up. And then out of nowhere, they're like, oh, I'm going to block you. I get too angry. I'm now level 3. And you're like, no, everything changed. I'm no longer in control of this match.
The way that I always describe the game was it's a tug of war where both sides just keep going. Like you tug your rope a little bit and deal a bunch of damage to them. They tug back and you start to fall over, and then you're like, okay, I got to recover and like pull it back and everything. And yeah, I agree. It really simulated that, just kind of like one-on-one fight. And sometimes even the games that are like blowouts, where like I remember one game at our regional that we had here where it was I think it was like a top 16 or top 8 game, and it was a one-turn game where they just entered, I'll dig your grave, and then just like pummel, pummel, and the opponent just drew no blocks, and they're like, I just lose. But like, okay, balance aside, we're not going to talk about like some of that stuff, whatever. Thematically, don't tell me that isn't a Dragon Ball Z thing also. Like that happens, it's like, and it's just that usually then there's like a sensu bean and they get back up and then there's another fight, but we'll just call that like the next game you played.
The best 2 out of 3, yeah.
Yeah, or something. Not that it actually didn't even have best 2 out of 3, unfortunately, but yeah, I mean, that could happen too. And that can be its own like, knock on like the game's balance or whatever, but simulation wise, I think that's actually like something that is kind of cool that can happen too, just from purely a simulation perspective, because I guess sometimes games are like, one issue is that games get so honed in on balance and abstraction and everything that the games start to become a little too samey. There's like too much catch-up mechanism applied into a game and stuff where it's like, nothing can really do the big flashy stuff and cool stuff and the fun simulation and stuff, because it's like, well, but we gotta like make sure these numbers are really tight so that every game goes like the exact same amount of time and everything. There's pros and cons to that, but I think a lot of time there's cons when it's just like, it's not as exciting because that the potential isn't there for that kind of stuff. TCG players, many TCG players have that like inner Timmy in them where it's like, I just want to do the really big play with the really big numbers, and my opponent's like, oh, I lose, like, because it's just too powerful and stuff. So that, it's nice to be able to have that as well.
Yeah, and even down to like win con mechanics in that game, it's very thematic. Like the 3 major win cons are your opponent dies, which they kill the big bad in the show. It's the end of the fight, obviously. Getting all the Dragon Balls simulates like, oh, you've literally wished for immortality. This fight's over. I can no longer win. Like, that's also very thematic. And then the third one is angering up, which is the classic moment in a lot of points in Dragon Ball Z where the hero just gets to a point of power where the opponent realizes that they can no longer win. Like, they have lost the match. Like when Goku goes Super Saiyan and Frieza starts realizing there's nothing I can do. Like, it's over. Or the point when Cell realizes, I bit off more than I can chew now. It's over. No matter what happens, he's gonna breeze me. Like, yep. Also very thematic.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's a really good pick. I like that one. I'm gonna toss in one of mine now, which is I'll toss in my. I don't have 2 of each one like you, but I liked the games that I picked both. I hope that everyone understands that I'm not trying to pick on anything, I guess. So my game that I think had a great IP is rest in peace, the original Decipher Star Wars customizable card game.
I thought that's what yours would be.
It has to be, because that game, unlike any other, now that game went maybe a little off the deep end on simulation. Just to be clear, we have these cards that are like, there's a card called Let the Wookiee Win, and it like cancels anything. It has this list of card names that it cancels, some of which I think on that one, I don't know if that one was an exact example of this, but it would even, in that game, they would list card names in reference to cards that hadn't even released yet. They were just like, we'll make a card named this at some point, and I guarantee this needs to cancel that because like whatever it's going to end up doing. But yeah, it'd be like, they'll list things that for like Let the Wookiee Win, it would be things that would like target your Chewbacca and stop them from doing things and stuff. So my memory isn't fantastic, and if there's any like hardcore CCG Star Wars CCG players like, that's not what that does. Okay, it's an example of like I don't have the card in front of me. I don't remember, but they would have these cards that just list a whole bunch of things that like you would just want to rationally think, well, I suppose if the transmission were terminated, that should probably stop a hologram card from being played because the transmission gets terminated. That I think that one is actually a pretty legit example. And they would have so they would end up being like super modular sometimes, and it'd be like, if you use this as this kind of thing, then you put it in your used pile. And if you wanted to do a stronger thing, you do a lost pile, and each of those would have a list of different like cards that could cancel or like move Luke from this site to another site or whatever. There's a card called Run Luke Run that is like make Luke run from one site to another site. But even like just on the whole, the card game was all about, especially once they released the special edition expansion with objectives. When you built your deck, you're like, okay, I'm building the Death Star attack deck, and in my deck, I'm playing a light side deck, and you played light side versus dark side. You couldn't mix them, again, like really like making sure that you couldn't have Luke and Vader on the same side unless you were playing the deck that could turn Vader to the light side or the deck that could turn Luke to the dark side. And you played your entire objective about, okay, I have to get Vader on table. If my opponent doesn't play Luke, then I get some advantage in just winning the game normally. If my opponent does play Luke, then my entire goal is to get Vader to the same side as Luke, play the special event that allows me then to confront him and try and turn him to the light side. And either I turn him and I succeed, and then my thing flips, and then my opponent takes a bunch of damage, and then I have Luke, and he's super powered now, and he's a dark side, like whatever. Or I fail and I kill Luke, or I have to try again if Luke comes back or whatever. Like your whole deck would be that. Your attack run deck would be like, I play the Death Star, I play the trench, I put ships in there, I play the attack run card. If I put proton torpedoes on my ships, I get a bonus to my attack run attempt. If I have a squadron, then I get a bonus to my attack run attempt, but I have to first destroy any TIE fighters that are in the way. Like legitimately, you had to do all this stuff, jump through all these hoops, and then the reward was your objective would flip, and you get to play this thing, and the opponent takes like a whole bunch of damage, and you retrieve a whole bunch of force, and then like for the rest of the game, like there's some bonus or whatever. It was just like so crazy to build these decks that were like simulating the show, like shot for shot almost, except sometimes your own spin on things, like except this time Obi-Wan's still alive and he's like gonna go kick ass somewhere or whatever. And yeah, I mean, I don't think I'll ever see a game, because you don't design games that are that off the deep end on simulation anymore. It's just not a thing that happens, because like balance wise, I don't know. I couldn't really tell you much about like the competitive balance of that game necessarily. I do know there were a number of objectives you could play, but like they often just were like kind of like the attack run deck wasn't like a competitively like great deck, but man, it was just really fun, to like get the X-Wings in there and like just try and blow up the Death Star and stuff. And you got to feel like you did that every time.
Nice.
So I know you don't have too much experience with that, so you probably don't have a lot you can add.
I've only heard from you tell us about it.
Yeah. It was wild, but like just like what a perfect example of like the Star Wars IP coming to life. So all right, Jordan, what's your final actually, you know what? Let's save your final great one for the end so we can end on a high note. How about that?
Okay.
Okay.
I was gonna save my meme pick for the.
Oh, okay. All right, fine.
I have a meme pick that's an IP thing too.
We'll do the meme pick at the end. Give me your final great one then.
So my final great one. That's a game that I'm not a huge fan of. I don't even think a card game anymore, because Hearthstone took it over. But the original World of Warcraft card game.
Yep.
The mechanics were very interesting. It had a weird resource system where you had to like do quests to get resource to do stuff, kind of like how in the MMO you got to get the experience to get all the cool stuff, and then do raids to get like your equipment. And you'd pick your class, and you'd have class specific attacks, and it was trying to kill the opponent. It had a cool equipment system where you'd equip your character as you did these like quests and raids that you had from your different decks. I don't know. I felt like it did a really good job of emulating that IP and the the like MMO RPG in a card game strange enough that was still, you know, a short form card game, kill your opponent kind of deal. Like I said, wasn't too big of a fan of the game itself, but the IP really stuck really well. So I thought it was really good. It had, you know, all the licensed art and everything. It was good.
Yeah, it was really popular when it came out, but I think part of that was just like the loot cards that people could
Yeah.
get for
There's those weird cards that like you'd get, and then there had a code on the bottom, and then you'd get real WoW like items that you could only get using those cards.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, so that's my pick for a game that I'm not a fan of, but I recognize the IP branding and the way they implemented it was actually pretty well done.
How do you feel about Hearthstone and how it's kind of succeeded that? Is it the same in simulation, or do you feel like it's not quite?
I haven't played it a lot.
Okay.
Similarly, I wasn't a huge fan of it. I know mechanically it's quite a bit different, but yeah, I can't say. That was also came out when I was already long done with World of Warcraft. When the card game came out, I was actively playing World of Warcraft, so I had a better view of like how it felt. But yeah, can't really say on Hearthstone. Not experienced with it enough.
Cool pick. All right, give us your one of your bad ones.
All right, so I'll start.
Not so great. No,
I'll start with the bad one with a game that I don't like. Dragon Ball Super. Nothing.
You're taking my pick.
Oh no. Yeah, because the IP in that game, it did like there's so many things wrong with it. Like you can play multiples of the same character. The game feel is just not very Dragon Ball Z-ish. Like the way you attack is not Dragon Ball Z-ish. Like there's just nothing about it, or sorry, Dragon Ball Super-ish. There's just nothing about it. Like even the way you transform isn't very like. I mean, certain moments in the show, like when you're near death, they get some boost by some, you know, Deus Ex Machina or whatever. But 9 times out of 10, it wasn't due to them almost being dead and then all of a sudden get it. It was like, so it's just weird that like when you are below a certain amount of death card, what are they called in Dragon Ball Super? Not death cards. They're basically just like reverse prize cards from Pokemon. Your life cards.
Yeah, it's just life.
It's like when you get under life cards, you transform, and like the way the like what are the event cards interact and like the stuff on them and the art on cards like doesn't match up with stuff. It just feels like they're like it's just literally a paint job. They had a mechanic in place and they're like, we need an IP, a theme for this game. And they're like, we have the rights to this. Sure, throw that paint slap on all these cards. Even the resource system, like resources, you just play those same characters and cards upside down, and it's like, what? That doesn't.
Let me jump in and try and blunt your blow here a little bit, because there are a lot of people who are fans of Dragon Ball Super, and I played it for a while, and I think the game was fun for sure.
Oh yeah, I'm not saying the game isn't fun. I'm just saying, as far as like the IP feeling, it doesn't feel like I'm playing a Dragon Ball Super game. It just feels like I'm playing a game that has Dragon Ball Super painted over it.
So there are a number of things that the game does to attempt to sort of bring the theme in to some amount. And I think my strongest argument about this is that they have to do that, right? It's like because it doesn't just come out kind of naturally through the gameplay, I feel. I think you're totally right there. On the plus side, I like that you pick a leader and everything, and typically they design, it's probably like somewhere between Yu-Gi-Oh archetypes and like colors and magic or whatever, where like there's almost soft archetypes based on what leader you play, and you're not going to only play those archetype cards, but also like your big deck, your deck's like big chain that it does, and big like boss monster type cards are going to be like, if you're playing Gogeta, they're probably going to be Gogetas of some kind, that kind of thing. At one point they put in a wish mechanic, which was actually like starting to get kind of cool, where you had 7 Dragon Balls, and when you've collected them all in one place, that is how you awaken your leader, instead of and you would awaken to like a wishing Shenron kind of thing, that then instead of like giving you a huge attack boost, would usually give you like a special ability you could pick from each turn, or when you did it or whatever, which like kind of getting a wish granted thing. So like I want to be clear, it's not like the game's devoid of theme and it's just you're playing war or anything with pictures of Goku and Piccolo and stuff. But I mean, I do agree. Like I said, this was my pick for a game that I think just doesn't like quite nail the theme. When I attack you with one of my characters and then we like combo our cards from our hand to try and up our attack, like what is that? What does that mean that I'm doing that? And I don't think I have a good answer. Like I've thought about that a lot. I don't think I have a good answer for what that is. Like is it like the support of my friends is like powering my attack or something? But then like I don't know, then it's so vague and so just kind of, and that's like not even a thing in the show other than like a spirit bomb kind of situation. And you do this for like, even when like Bulma attacks Broly or whatever, Dende attacks or something. It's like, and then I pitch these Gojitas and stuff, and he like powers up. It's like what is? I don't know what's going on here thematically. Doesn't mean the game's bad. It doesn't at all mean that. And it's perfectly. And I think people have different tastes and different like levels of like. Some people would have heard my Star Wars simulation thing and been like, God, that sounds terrible. Like I just give me balanced numbers, competitive game and stuff, and like. And people there are definitely people who care a lot more about just like how well mechanically is the game, and like the abstraction is perfectly fine as long as it like mechanically is interesting and stuff. And I think I can be that way sometimes too, but I generally like a stronger theme, so I tend to prefer things where the simulation is a little bit, and that means I will bounce off of games sometimes when they're just like a little too abstracted. And since you took my pick, I'm going to throw in an extra pick then of I'm going to pick Weiss Schwarz, which is not a game. I don't know if you've played that at all, Jordan.
One of our friends he tried to teach me the game, and then he told me like how you get cards and like how you build a deck, and then based on the gameplay I played, I was like, I'll pass.
Yeah,
so I have very little experience.
My issue, my main number one issue, first of all, Weiss Schwarz has for collectors has some of the like most beautiful looking cards on the market. These signed cards and these special artworks and stuff. Like definitely is a cool game. If your like favorite anime in the world comes out in it, you can look at picking up some product just to like collect because they look really cool. Gameplay wise, though, the problem I have with Weiss Schwarz is that it is actually an example of what I was talking about earlier, a game that's just like designed too much to be fair, where like because I think like part of it is they didn't want like every you typically play with just a single IP in your deck. You're like, okay, I'm going to build a fairy tale deck. I'm going to build that time I got reincarnated as a slime deck or whatever. To use something that isn't from like 2 decades ago at this point or whatever. And you would only have cards from that set. But I think they didn't want it to feel like, wow, like that property is so much stronger than this property or whatever. So a lot of the cards are just kind of do the same things, basic things across each property. So a new set comes, it's like, oh, it's yellow 1-drop that does that thing. It's like, oh look, it's another green 3-drop where that's the ability that it does. It's like and they're like it's not that there's no difference, but it's that the gameplay stylistic difference between the decks is so marginal or minimal that it's actually like impressive when you see one that like does something like kind of cool for once. Like I think I saw like a Sword Art Online one that was trying to do that. I don't know if people watch like season. I don't remember. It's been a long time since I watched it. It was like season 2 or 3 or something. Like Asuna learns some like 13 strike sword attack or something from this girl who played all the time. Whatever. I'm not gonna try to spoil things either. But like it's like this. It's this like super cool 13 sword strike and 13 strike sword attack, and I think her card let you like look and dig 13 cards for like some purpose or something. It's like, whoa, like a thing from the show. That's like why, like I felt like really amazed when I saw that. It's like that's like oddly thematic, and that's I think just my big like telling blow. And like doesn't mean the game's bad, and the cool thing about Weiss is that every game tends to feel like it goes pretty deep, and you all get to feel like you play all your cool characters and stuff. And if that's what you like in a game, you'll probably enjoy that aspect. But the cost is that I don't think things do anything that like is extremely like neat. It's like,
you ready for me to blow your mind?
Okay.
So I feel like you're one thing to consider with this. It's probably not gonna, but I just think it's funny. What if it's secretly one of the more thematic games you've played, and it's on theme because technically the game Weiss Schwartz you're not playing like you're playing out the anime. The theme is technically the reason why you have like the climax mechanic is because you're technically a show competing for like prime time. And the reason why a lot of those cards are the same is because in anime, there's a lot of anime tropes that are the same across all anime, and that's why those effects are the same across all the decks. Just
Okay.
slightly different for the theme.
I did know the show thing. I just didn't want to like delve too far into it, I guess. But yeah, like the idea is that you're both like because it's really weird. It's like you're both like putting on an episode of your show or you're like the arc of your show, and it's like whose was more exciting or something is I guess like the winner of it. I don't know.
Yeah, it was really whack.
Yeah, it's kind of weird in that way. But again, it's like it's just if you're a fan of that show, it's like you're gonna see all the cool moments, the climax cards that show like the cool moments from the show and everything. But yeah, I don't know if I'd say my mind is blown by that, but I do appreciate this kind of speculation that it's just like, well,
the theme is just meta.
They're just repeating the same anime over. It's like every isekai is like, every other isekai effectively. So they're all going to have similar effects or whatever. Maybe that's what they were going for. And if so, maybe that's actually an incredible example of simulation.
Yeah, it's probably more so they're like, balance. We don't want to think of new effects. Throw that on there.
Yeah. I don't know. We'll see. But
yeah,
maybe we get some.
Maybe they're just
the
the designer's just the most meta person ever, and he intended that.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's close this out, Jordan. What are your bad ones?
My bad example of an IP for a game that I do enjoy is Metacross. I love the game. It's a great game, but thematically, it does zero. Like from the mechanics to like how you play it, it's like what is happening? Like, yeah, you can play doubles of the same character, in characters that are supposed to be like a one person in that universe. You're mixing universes. The mechanics just don't really portray anything from any of the IPs it's in. It's like I play this guy and I get meta points to play other stuff. And this guy I play gives me minus meta points to attack. And you're using attacks that the attacks literally just don't have names. They're just like strength 8. Boom.
Yeah. So like... I have to say, I feel bad that I didn't think of this. It's a perfect example of a game where it was made to fit multiple IPs, but like to a fault, that like, because anything can just kind of go in because there isn't any really strong theming. Here's the other issue is that and again, like I've been hosting last year I hosted the Metacross like Worlds event at Gen Con or whatever. We had 4 players. It was sick.
It was dope. I was there.
It was, we just had fun like slinging the cards again. Like it's a fun game to play. I love some of my decks. I love playing them. I love the way that mechanically everything works.
Mm-hmm.
So just to be clear, I like the game.
Yeah, game is fantastic, but
one of the biggest flaws. One of the biggest flaws is that the game was designed, and it's like, this is supposed to be a pro of the game. It's designed to be like all of the card effects are relatively simple so that it's like kind of easy to pick up and see and know what's going on the board. So like the opposite of universes where like there's only up to 3 characters on the board and each of them has like one effect and it tells you exactly when that effect triggers and stuff. Whereas like in universes like, well, I have like 9 things and each have 2 things and this thing flips and this thing can unflip and my character can unflip. Like it's like, the very opposite. But that means that like your ultra rare Superman was his effect was he has vigilance. He does not tap or push to attack, which is like, that is like, imagine if Magic printed a new mythic rare and it's like, this is a regularly costed creature with vigilance. Like wow.
However, to its defense, vigilance in that game was very potent, and when you consider that you only ever can attack with 3 people and you have to defend with those same 3 people, so like they're impactful effects, but they're just not like hyper exciting. Like it's like the guy does this and that's it. They'll be potent, but they're not really jazzing you up.
But it means that when you look at Ultra Superman, Superboy Prime was pretty pushed as far as like effects and stuff too. When you look at like that Superman though, and you're like, okay, let's say you haven't read what he does. This Ultra Superman, he's gonna have heat vision. He's gonna have X-ray vision. He's gonna have frost breath. He's gonna be like indestructible. He's powered by the sun. Maybe he gets depowered if there isn't a sun. You look at him as like does not push to attack. Like what about that is like Superman? Like it's I don't know what that's so like yeah again
unending stamina.
yeah well it's like a small aspect of him I guess, but it's like yeah.
Or another good example is what was his name? Captain. I want to say Captain Leroy, and I know that's not his name.
Captain Levi.
Captain Levi. Yeah, his effect. He's supposed to be
on Titan.
He's supposed to be this solo badass in the anime, and his big effect in this game is everyone else does cool stuff and he does nothing.
There's a team attack version of him that's all about team attack. Yeah. Well, okay, he does lead the team though.
I guess
in the anime, so he leads his scout regiment team. And yeah, so like I said, they try. The designer definitely tried. Richie, who's a guy we really respect, and he did a really good job designing the game mechanically. But I think it was just like the flaw was it was too open-ended to be able to fit so many IPs, and it was too pulled down in complexity to be able to really fit a lot of that. Like Star Wars CCG is so complex. It's like people make fun of like the attrition system in that game, which I'm not even going to get into, because of just like how needlessly complex everything was. But the point was that like sometimes to get more simulation, that additional complexity in the game is required, because you have to fit all these like corner cases and aspects in it. Like characters have to be able to do like tons of stuff to be able to like really encapsulate who that character is and everything. And so when a game is made so simplistic, like checkers or chess or something, also it's like, and even chess people think is like complicated because you got to learn how each piece moves or whatever. But like realistically, it's still like once you know those, like that's the end of the complexity of the rules. Then the rest is just like learning how to play well. And you know, having a game that is like lower complexity just sort of tends to make things more abstracted in a way also. Not always the case, but it tends to. And having a higher complexity game opens up the door to have more simulation put into it if the designers feel like kind of doing it that way. So,
yeah.
Okay, well, that was actually kind of interesting. I was really excited about some of your picks there. It was really fun to talk about, and I think we kind of got into talking about some kind of cool aspects of simulation, abstraction, and IPs and stuff that I hope gave you guys something kind of fun to think about and everything. Like, what is your? Go ahead and comment down below. What is a game that you think is simulated very well? It's like, and maybe you disagree with us. Maybe you really like how they do simulation in Dragon Ball Super or Weiss Schwarz. Maybe Jordan is spot on with his Weiss Schwarz theory, and it is actually the best simulated game that we've talked about. If you have any thoughts on simulation in card games and your favorite IPs in card games, go ahead and toss it down below. But that is going to wrap up this. We're trying to do about our episode, which we are right at that mark here. So that's going to wrap up this episode of the Maindeck Podcast. We're so happy to be back. And this is still going to be numbered number 14. I'm not changing the numbering again. We're just going to keep moving forward with the name change. That's perfectly fine. And we will be back really soon with our next episode, which will be myself and Kevin talking about pre-releases and the Magic pre-release that he played in. And then we'll have Jordan and Mike and everyone else back for future episodes. I think we're going to just keep doing this one-on-one thing because I think it's kind of cool, and it'll also make our banter more interesting, so it's not everyone saying the same thing every time. So, sure. Jordan, thanks so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. And thanks everyone for watching. And of course, finally, special extra thanks to our patrons who make all of this possible. Your names are going to be appearing right in front of our faces here. And if you guys want to be a patron, we got so much cool stuff that we're giving you this year that we're super excited about, including we just revealed our final version of our patron exclusive 2022 supporter playmat, which you get if you support us on Patreon. Check the link down below if you want to do that. We really appreciate your support. And that's how we're able to do this cool stuff. So with that said, hope you guys have a wonderful day. Keep on gaming. We'll catch you in the next one. See you guys.
Goodbye.